Once again, thank you very much. Go ahead.
Here's my dilemma.
Yes, sir.
And I'm going to disagree. I'm sure the chairman isn't surprised because in terms of the sheer numbers. This administration may have done some things that are very controversial, but what I think the numbers bear out that this administration has increased tremendously the number of people who are being deported for serious offenses, but they're getting beat up because they're not deporting the people who don't get deported for running a red light and so they're getting beat up because they're anti-immigration. But if you look at their numbers, the people who are getting deported are the people who really need to be deported. And I think, is it your perception that the large majority, whatever side of this debate you're on, you're in favor of getting rid of the people that don't need to be here and don't deserve to be here?
Sure.
So
I think everyone who cares about this country, whether they have legal documentation or not, they want to see that happen.
And so the question from my perspective is, are you going to throw the baby out with the bathwater? Are you going to punish everybody because you're after a certain set of people? And to me...
But isn't that the reason for these bills in the first place? Really, because we have federal laws. And someone would say, well, we can't let status quo go. Well, status quo now, the police chiefs of our cities are making those decisions what they think is best for their town or municipality. And that is fighting crime, not fighting immigration. I'm wrong, and I'm not a politician. I don't know the ins and outs. I know there's,
I'm with Jose. None of us know. The reason that we, all run is because we think we have something to offer, not because we necessarily think that we know the answers or any of those things, because I don't think we do. But I do think it's important to recognize that if this was about, at least from my perspective, if this was about getting rid of the bad people, the murderers and the rapists and the drug dealers and the criminals, I'd be the first person voting for it. I was a prosecutor before I got elected to the legislature. But it seems to me a waste of time and money in a really critical time in our national economy and our state economy, for that matter, to be chasing groundskeepers and maids and people who are contributing in a very real way to our economy and are not violating any of the other provisions of the statute.
Are there anything in this bill that actually gives our officers more weapons or more ability to fight serious crime?
Not
other than what they have now?
Not from my reading of the bills. Even the committee substitute just adds more. In my view, it adds fuel to the fire because it allows you to ask more questions, and it applies and it says you can't adopt a policy that would allow a police chief to make their own decision. You can't adopt a policy that would allow a sheriff to make his or her own decision. You have to have a mandate that everybody is going to be doing the same thing, and that is asking for immigration status. And I'm with you.
And if that's the case, then, really, I heard somebody say, if that's the case, then why don't we mandate that everyone must be asked for their immigration status? Well, fine, I'll carry my passport with me.
I'm with you because I have employees with me who are Latino, but one has green eyes and not very dark, and when he drives through the Border Patrol checkpoint,
nothing.
There's no issue there. On the other hand, someone who looks a little more Latino derives a minimum of a conversation and sometimes a little bit more as a result.
That's what concerns me about my daughter. 17-year-old driving. You hate to see them driving anyway because they're growing up. But one more thing, if an officer stopped her and 17-year-old, what do you answer? What's she going to say? Is she going to be taken downtown?
Well, and the worst thing is, that, in my opinion, thank you, Mr. Chairman, is that it gives any officer, and I have a lot of friends who are officers, and I trust 99.9% of every officer. I trust every officer up to the point I meet them, but I served on a city council where we had one officer in particular who made it a point of pushing the envelope to the edge just so that he could sue the city. His wife was a lawyer, and she would sue the city, and they'd get settlements all the time and do things that were very questionable, and just in order to get something. And so my fear is that when you put some legislation in that removes all the checks and the balances. I don't know any other legislation that we put in place in this state where we tell the immediate supervisor of an employee they can no longer supervise their employee. I don't know of anything else that we've ever done. I think if we tried that in any other legislation, they'd look at us like we were crazy.
You know, the worst part for me is I remember a lesson I learned as a little kid in Alpine, Texas, growing up, where somebody's money got stolen out of their locker, and they lined up every kid. They lined up every kid, and they gave everybody licks, and they punished everybody. And then it turned out that it wasn't even one of the students that had stolen the money. So you've punished everybody for something that didn't even occur. And so, to me, that's the message that we're sending. And frankly, I went to law school. I went to law school because I was taught that you had to be guilty of something, and to treat everybody like they're lawbreakers in this sense. Because there's going to be, you know, the Catholic in me will tell you that there's mortal sins and there's venial sins, at least under the old teachings of the church. And, you know, venial sins we can get by, but it's the mortal sins I'm after.
Well,
Colonel Rivera has a question for you.
Yes, sir.
I want to perhaps take the issue of public safety a little further. It seems like you and some of the other witnesses have appropriately focused on the separation of families, and perhaps people that are here without documents would not report them being victimized by a criminal. Perhaps a woman that was raped would not be able to come forward, a woman that's been affected by domestic violence. We've discussed those kinds of things. But I want to take the discussion further to the whole community. If it's a crack house, and good people know about it in your congregation, they're not going to report that crack house.
No, sir.
If it's cartel or gang members, they're not going to come forward and report those people. So that crack house and those gangs in those communities are going to affect the entire community, not just your Hispanic congregation or Hispanic neighborhoods. And aren't we really going with these bills, which are supposed to be designed to promote public safety, getting rid of the bad guys that are here without documents, illegal aliens that are committing violent crimes or parts of gangs or selling drugs or having crack houses and drug labs? We've now just changed the whole scenario to where we've made the communities more unsafe, while at the same time making individuals more unsafe, and people that have nothing to do with this issue one way or the other are now more at risk as a result of this legislation.
Let me put a hypothetical situation to you. Let's say you go to my church and you're pulling out of the parking lot, and as you pull out of the parking lot, somebody speeding, doesn't signal, hits your car. There's somebody standing on the corner who happens to be undocumented. They witness the fact. They could sit there and give testimony to the police, helping you effectively protect what is yours. Yet, what's the first thing that they're going to do if this law is passed? Well, even now, just from the threat of the law, they're going to take off as fast as they can, and you're not going to have a witness.
I'm trying to take it further, because there are people in here that have this xenophobic fear about illegal aliens, and that they're going to all do terrible things to the community, or many of them will. And so we have this bill that's supposed to make us safer, but what I'm saying is people, whether they're white, brown, black, whatever religion or creed or color, are in fact going to be less safe, because communities are not going to trust their law enforcement officers. They're not going to be able to work with them as they do now. So we're not just talking about individual safety issues, like the woman that's been raped, or the young boy that's here undocumented that got beat up, or some other victims. We're talking about less safety for entire communities. Would you not agree?
Yes, sir. One of the things that we've seen with CAPA, and I do not represent them, but I am a member of CAPA. It's Clergy and Police Alliance in Fort Worth. We go through a training, 16 weeks if I remember. We're allowed on any crime scene at the discretion of the officer in charge. Many times have been called out. I remember one time I was called out in the middle of the night. I go to a scene where a Hispanic gentleman had passed, and the officers are there trying to get information. The fact that I was out and able to help them and say, look, you need to trust these gentlemen. All they're trying to do is take care of the situation and find out. With this law, you're going to be closing those doors. And you said it's an unbased, unreasonable fear, and that fear is the fear of the unknown. Because maybe perhaps I didn't grow up Hispanic, I don't understand you. Well, all this law is going to do is make people not want to talk. I mean, common sense says with this bill, if it passes into law, when somebody who is Hispanic is approached by a police officer for any reason, whether it's for them or against them, I mean, obviously, a criminal's not, if he's halfway intelligent, is not going to try to incriminate himself. But what you've got is the good folks, the folks who could be there and stand up for the community and help our society, and now they're going to be excluded from the process also. But I do agree with you that it will be much more dangerous for everyone in general, no matter what your race, because you're closing off the door to one part of our population.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.